Wild
She
West
doesn't
stories.
need chains.
Who was the wild girl? No
Only
cowboy could
understanding.
tame until his heart did on a sweltering summer noon in Texas, 1844. The square of San Antonio lay thick with dust and buzzing whispers. The crowd pressed around a wooden platform where a young woman with fiery eyes and a mane of tangled hair stood silent yet defiant. Katerina, the one they called the Wild Girl, had once again become the subject of the town's judgment and ridicule. From within that circle of scorn, a quiet man stepped forward. Max, a widowed cowboy with a sun-worn face and eyes marked by loss, did not speak. He needed no explanations. Wordlessly, he pulled out his wallet, laid down the demanded sum upon the wooden table, and extended his hand toward Katerina. In that instant, through the haze of dust and the venom of gossip, their eyes met. Katerina did not see pity in Max, but a rare spark of recognition. And Max, for the first time in years of grief, saw in this untamed girl a flame that might light his life again. No applause followed, no grand speeches, only a silent choice, but one that carved a new path for them both. Part 1. The Man of Wind and Dust. The road from San Antonio to the ranch stretched endlessly. Wooden wheels ground against the cracked earth, raising a haze of dust behind the wagon. Katerina sat beside him, her calloused hands clutching at her dress, her gaze darting now and then toward the man holding the reins. Max sat upright, broad-shouldered, his back like a wall of oak, his face carved by sun wind and sorrows without name. No words were spoken along the long road, only the steady rhythm of hooves and the restless sigh of wind across the barren fields. Katerina was used to silence, but this silence carried a different weight. It was not the silence of contempt, nor the silence of force. It was a silence that left room for another to breathe a quiet gentleness, as though Max wished to give her time to grow used to the thought she had escaped the humiliation of the square. Sometimes, Max turned his head, his eyes brushing her face, not probing, not pitying, only a silent nod as if to say, "I know you are strong. I will not break that." Katerina felt her chest loosen just a little. As dusk fell, the ranch appeared at the edge of the horizon. Weathered fences sagged. The gate creaked, weeds grew high to the knee. The main house, dark timber, with a roof dulled to gray, sat with windows like sleeping eyes. No laughter, no lamplight, only the long shadows of evening steeped in cold and loneliness. Katerina shivered. This was not the lively haven she might have once dreamed of. Yet strangely, the stillness did not drive her to flee. It was like a mirror reflecting her own soul, scarred, abandoned, left behind by the world. Max brought the wagon to a halt before the house. He did not lead her inside. Instead, he walked to the back. There, beneath the boughs of an old oak, stood a small cabin. Its roof was plain, its walls dark wood but firm. A narrow window caught the last gold of sunset, casting the cabin in unexpected warmth. Max set Katerina's few belongings at the door. His voice was low, roughened by gravel, and years from now on, this is yours. Not large, not fine, but clean. If you choose to stay, treat it as home. Katerina froze. The word home echoed inside her like a luxury never touched. For years, she had known only cellars, damp lofts, cattle sheds reeking of rot. Places to sleep, never a place to belong. She stepped inside. The wooden floor creaked, but had been swept. On the table stood a clay vase with a few dried wildflowers. In the corner, a small bed covered with a worn but tidy blanket. The last light of day spilled through the window, bathing the room in golden calm. Her hand touched the bed frame, trembling. A strange sensation coursed through her spine, peace. At the door, Max stood quietly, not intruding. He knew that sometimes giving someone a roof was not a promise of sweet words, but an act of silent respect. Katerina turned. In the fading light, she saw Max's eyes, clearly deep-weathered, but holding something unlike any man she had known. No lust, no power to dominate, only an invitation, if you wish, begin again here. For the first time in years, Katerina nodded. Not a vow of loyalty, not a pledge of devotion, simply an acknowledgement she had found a place to rest. As night fell, wind whispered through the fields. Katerina sat upon the small bed, listening to horses neighing in the distance, insects humming in the dark. The oil lamp cast its faint glow, painting her shadow upon the wall. She drew the blanket around her and closed her eyes. Within her, a feeling spread, neither fear nor defiance, a fragile calm, as if life itself had ceased its storming, allowing her to breathe. Outside, Max remained awake. He sat on the porch of the big house, a cigarette glowing red in the night. He knew tomorrow would bring troubles. The town would talk, neighbors would judge. Yet tonight, seeing the lamp glowing in the small cabin, his heart eased. For the first time in years, the ranch felt alive. That night, two strangers bound by wounds found a fragile thread between them. Katerina, for the first time, felt she might call a place home. Max, after years of emptiness, felt his barren ranch no longer stood hollow. And in that simple moment, amidst the wind and dust of the harsh West, a story began. Part 2. The woman who spoke the language of horses. Morning light slipped through the gaps in the stable roof, casting hazy shafts across the air thick with straw dust and the musk of restless animals. Max knew this world well. The broad stalls filled with mustangs, untamed eyes burning with defiance, creatures never fully broken by men. Since Sarah's death, the herd had grown even more volatile, unsettled, as though they too had felt the loss and rejected all touch. Max entered, as he always did, but this time, Katerina walked beside him. He intended only to have her sweep haul water feed, the animal's simple tasks. He never thought she could do more. Yet Katerina stood still in the storm of stamping hooves and fierce whinnies with a strange calm. She did not flinch, did not retreat. Her dark eyes fixed upon Thunder, the great black stallion, infamous for fury and danger. Max had tried many times to draw near, but Thunder would rear the moment he stepped close, screaming like thunder itself, eyes ablaze with rage and grief. No one believed the beast could ever be touched. No one except Katerina. She moved toward him, each step slow, as though crossing a dream. Max watched his brow furrowed, torn between stopping her and yielding to curiosity. Katerina lifted her hand. No rope, no whip, only a palm, calloused yet gentle. Thunder screamed, his massive body, quaking hooves slamming down as a warning. But she did not withdraw. Her lips moved, whispering words in a language only she and the stallion could understand. They were not spells, but breaths, aligned with the beat of a wild heart. She spoke to Thunder of the things he had endured, as if she could read his memories in his burning eyes. I know you lost the one who understood you. I know you fear men will only come to bind and command. But I am not them. I am here only to listen. Max froze. He could not hear the words, but he saw the gentleness in her gaze and saw Thunder's head begin to lower inch by inch. Time seemed to stop. The winds outside faded. Only the stallion's breath filled the air, ragged then steadying. Katerina stepped closer, her hand brushing his tangled mane, stroking as if she touched a soul. Thunder trembled, every muscle taut, then exhaled in a long surrender, bowing his head at last. He had yielded not to force, but to patience and care. Max could hardly believe his eyes. He had spent years trying to know these mustangs. Even Sarah, his gentle wife, had never dared more than slipping them grain through a crack in the door. But Katerina in one morning had reached what none of them could. He stepped forward slowly, boots striking the ground. Thunder raised his head wary, but when Katerina whispered again, the stallion's fire softened his gaze steady upon Max. The cowboy's throat tightened. Before him was no longer the wild girl despised by the town, but a woman bearing the raw, untamed strength of nature itself. Katerina turned her eyes, shining sweat, soaking her hair strands clinging to her forehead. On her lips bloomed the faintest smile, the first since she had set foot on the ranch. And Max, for the first time in years, felt his heart stir with a rhythm he had forgotten. He said nothing. He needed no words. The astonishment in his eyes was enough for Katerina to know she had broken an unseen wall. To him, the herd was labor-livelihood memory of Sarah. To her, they were kin souls to be heard. And in the moment, Thunder bowed his head. They both understood. They had found a shared language, not of speech, but of empathy. That day, the stable's sounds changed. No longer shrill defiance, but steady breaths, measured steps, the echoes of new trust. Max left in silence, yet his gaze never left Katerina. Within him, a seed was planted, quiet admiration and a fragile hope that perhaps this woman might bring back something he thought gone forever. Katerina lingered beside Thunder for a long while. She knew this was no victory of taming, but the meeting of two kindred spirits. And she knew, too, that the man had seen her not as the wild woman cast aside, but as a human being worthy of respect. When night came, Katerina returned to her cabin under the silver wash of moonlight. She leaned against the window, watching the mustangs rest beneath the stars. And in her chest, for the first time, a new feeling rose. She was no longer entirely lost. Here among wind and dust, among untamed horses and a solitary cowboy, Katerina had begun to find her own voice. Part 3. The Fateful Storm. In Texas, the winds could turn without warning. That morning, the sky was clear. The sun stretched across dry golden fields, the land as calm as any other day. But by afternoon, black clouds rolled in from the west, thick and heaving like a stampede of giants. The wind howled, whipping dust into blinding swirls, slamming stable doors against the walls. Max looked up his chest, sinking. He had lived his life beneath Texas storms. He knew their fury. He threw himself into work, lashing gates shut, herding livestock into shelter, his hands moving quick, but his eyes restless. He thought only this: Katerina would retreat to her cabin, bar the door, and wait for the storm to pass. That is what anyone would do. But Katerina was not anyone. When Max turned, he saw her sprinting across the yard, clothes whipping in the gale hair, already drenched by the first pounding rain. She was running toward the open fields, where the mustangs screamed in terror, circling broken fences, threatening to impale themselves on jagged wood. Max's heart seized. God help her, she'll die out there, he shouted, but the storm swallowed his voice. Katerina did not hear, or if she did, she paid no mind. Her eyes were only for the herd. They thrashed in chaos hooves, lashing mud into the air, blood already streaking the hides of those who had crashed the splintered fence. She could not stand idle. She vaulted the rails, sliding down the slick grass, straight toward Thunder, the stallion leader of the herd, his cries splitting the sky with fear. Rain fell harder. The wind roared. Lightning tore the heavens open, painting her small frame in white fire against the madness of beasts. Max lunged after her boots, sinking deep in the mire, but he could not catch her. All he could do was watch his pulse hammering terror squeezing his chest. Katerina raised her arms, her scream lost to the storm, but her stance, her gaze, rooted the herd to stillness. She pressed forward, hand trembling yet unyielding, laying it on Thunder's rain-soaked neck. The stallion's breath tore in ragged bursts. His hooves struck the ground, but her whispers, soft, steady, drew him down from frenzy. His eyes softened, his body stilled. One by one, the others followed, circling closer, letting her guide them toward the safety of the stable. Max could hardly believe it. In the teeth of a storm, Katerina was doing the impossible. She was not breaking the mustangs with whip or chain, not forcing them with shouts. She led with trust, with a heart that beat in time with theirs. And in that moment, Max saw she was saving not only the horses, but saving him, pulling him out of the long night that had darkened the ranch since Sarah's death. When the last horse stumbled into shelter, Katerina collapsed trembling. Her dress-torn hair plastered to her pale face, lips blue with cold. Max ran to her, dropping to his knees. Without thought, he gathered her small frame against him, clutching her to his chest, forcing his warmth into her shivering body. For the first time since Sarah's passing, his arms closed fully around another soul. Katerina leaned into him, breath ragged, but not with fear. Her eyes opened, meeting his gaze so close she could hear the thunder of his heart. Around them, the storm screamed, but between them fell a stillness, a pocket of strange peace. For the first time, she felt safe in a man's arms. And Max, for the first time in years, felt his heart come alive again, trembling like a young tree in spring rain. Outside, the storm raged on. But within that embrace, two battered souls found the calm they had sought all their lives. A new beginning, born from the tempest. Part 4. Whispers in the night. Night fell quickly after the storm. The air outside still carried the scent of wet earth, of crushed weeds steeped in rain. Overhead, gray clouds slowly dispersed, revealing sparse stars trembling after the fury. Inside the small cabin, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden light across wooden walls. Shadows flickering over two figures sitting together, silent, as if the world beyond had ceased to exist. Max set a kettle on the stove, his rough hands clumsy yet careful. He was used to nights of solitude, his only companions smoke and bitter whiskey. But tonight, another sat across from him, wrapped in a thick blanket, dark eyes glinting in the firelight. Katerina gazed into the flames, wordless, though storms churned within her. She had never known closeness like this, never known what it was to be heard without judgment. Max slid a cup toward her. "Drink." It'll warm you." His voice was rough, stripped of poetry, but its plainness held sincerity. Katerina took it, her hands trembling from the cold, pressing against the hot clay, the warmth spreading through her body and slowly to the depths of her heart. They sat a long while in quiet. The wind outside sighed faintly, leaving the cabin steeped in stillness. At last, Katerina set down the cup, her eyes on the fire. Her voice soft but steady. "I ran from 5 ranches. They called me untamable. But none of them knew I only wanted to live as myself, not as the obedient shadow they demanded." Max lifted his head, eyes deep as wells. He understood every word. He, too, had once fought the world, after losing Sarah, only to discover that grief could not be outrun. He nodded, answering slowly. "They never understood you, Katerina, just as they never understood me. When Sarah died, all they told me was to move on, to remarry, to live as though nothing had changed. But how could they know every night I still hear her laughter in the wind?" Katerina turned, seeing in his eyes not anger, but the quiet weight of pain carried too long. For the first time, she felt herself soften, not judged, but accompanied. She told him of her childhood, a barefoot girl, running wild through forests, beaten for refusing to sit and sew, mocked for speaking to horses and birds. Of years spent as a servant, treated as less than human, yet always clutching the dream of freedom. Her voice shook, but her eyes burned with fire. Max listened without interruption. No judgment, no correction. He sat like a silent oak, offering shade enough for Katerina to feel, perhaps for the first time, sheltered. When she finished, he sighed, his words low, almost reverent. "You are stronger than anyone I have ever known. And because of that, I feel alive again." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Firelight painted her face, revealed the glimmer at her lashes. She did not weep, only let the tide of feeling rise. Max's hand hovered on the arm of his chair, yearning, yet hesitant. Loss had long made him afraid to open. But Katerina, with her simple whispers, was filling a void he had thought eternal. They needed no words. In that narrow space, silence spoke its own language. A language not taught, not forced-born, when 2 broken souls found one another in the dark. That night, Max and Katerina made no vows, no promises. They simply sat together, sharing emptiness through presence. And when the fire dwindled to embers, they knew something had begun in that cabin. Not pity, not possession, but empathy. A warmth thawing hearts long frozen. The night after the storm bore an unusual stillness. Outside, the ground lay soaked, the scent of trampled grass mingling with wet soil. The wind slipped weakly through the cracks like the sigh of anger spent. Inside, the fire still burned, casting tall shadows of 2 figures against the wooden walls. Max sat opposite Katerina, his calloused hands cupping a steaming mug. He had never been a man of talk, too long, accustomed to silence and the beating of his own heart. Yet now across from him sat a woman, wrapped in a blanket, eyes glowing like coals. Katerina watched the flames, her gaze both fragile and fierce. Memories of Sarah flickered in Max's mind, her laughter by the big hearth, her gentle voice, the quiet evenings under the stars. She had been soft, tender, never storm. Her sudden loss had carved a hollow so vast he believed it could never be filled. But looking at Katerina, Max felt the difference. She was not softness. She was fire-will, wild strength. And strange as it was, that force did not frighten him. It reminded him he was alive, that his heart was not yet stone. Katerina set her cup down, hand pressed to the warm wood. Her voice rose trembling yet resolute. I ran from 5 ranches. They beat me, tied me, tried to silence me. But I could not stay. I was not born to trail behind a man's shadow. I wanted to run, to taste freedom, to touch the earth on my own terms. She paused, eyes fixed on the fire, as if staring into memories aflame. Then her voice faltered. When I was a girl, my mother said I was difficult. I would not sit to sew or recite prayers. I ran to the woods, spoke to horses, to birds. They called me mad. Every night I paid for it with lashes, with laughter at my back. I grew up beneath scorn until I learned to become the thing they feared, not the thing they crushed. Max remained silent, gazed deep as a still lake. Katerina's throat tightened, but for the first time in years, she let her past pour free. He exhaled, placing his cup aside, his hand trembling as if to touch her shoulder, but stopping short. His voice was low, colored with memory. After Sarah died, people came to console me, but their comfort was commands remarry. Forget, as though it were so simple. But she was the light of this house. When she was gone, only silence remained. Even the horses grew wild, as if the whole earth turned its back on me. He paused, eyes locked on the flames, sparks reflected like lightning in his pupils. There were nights I sat on the porch, alone, listening to the wind tear through the fences, believing it was her voice. I lived like a corpse, working until dawn, waiting only for daylight. Then I saw you on that wooden stand, with eyes of someone who had lost everything but still refused to yield. And I knew I could not turn away. Katerina's eyes welled. For the first time, a man spoke to her, not with claim, but with naked grief and reverence. 2 lonely hearts recognized each other like 2 drums finding the same rhythm. She smiled, faintly fragile as moonlight. They call me a wild mare, but maybe you are the first man who does not wish to tie a rope around my neck. Max shook his head, his words firm yet soft as breath. I do not want to break you. I only want you to stay on your own terms. In the cabin, his words rang like an unspoken vow. Katerina felt her walls begin to crack, the barriers of years loosening. Outside, wind brushed the wide fields. Inside, the fire sank low, but warmth endured. They sat long into the night, listening to the crackle of wood, to the steady beat of their own hearts. Katerina leaned back, eyes closed, letting warmth spread. Max watched her overcome with a feeling unnamed sorrow, admiration, and the fragile sense of finding a peace he had thought forever lost. When only embers glowed, Max rose, meaning to bid her good night. But her eyes opened, holding his for a still moment. That look was no plea, no promise. Only a silent assent. Here in this cabin, we are no longer alone. And so, the night closed, with whispers unspoken. 2 shattered souls found a bond of empathy, and the long hollows within them began at last to fill. Part 5. When the town rose against them, morning sunlight spilled across San Antonio, pale and thin, carrying none of the warmth that Katerina needed. After the storm, the ranch seemed calmer, but the town did not. Whispers spread like wildfire across dry prairie grass, sharper and more merciless with each passing day. A trip to the market for salt, a glimpse of her on the wagon near the church everywhere. Eyes followed her cold measuring or curling with smirks. Isn't that the woman they once tried to sell? How shameful a man like Max bringing such filth home. Poor Sarah must be twisting in her grave, the words loud enough for her to hear sliced like knives. Max knew, and he was more tense than ever. He had braced himself for talk when he brought Katerina back, but he had not foreseen how quickly the storm of judgment would swell. Each Sunday, the church filled to bursting, not only with prayer, but with gossip. Padre Miguel, a priest once respected, began weaving warnings into his sermons. A man must remain pure, must honor the memory of the dead. Bringing a fallen soul into one's house is not always charity. Sometimes it is folly. The church grew silent, all eyes turning to Max. He sat upright, unmoving, though inside the words struck deep. Beside him, Katerina bowed her head, her face hot with shame, her hands clenched tight. She felt like a criminal on trial before the whole town. The breaking point came when Dona Marta, the most powerful woman in the region, and Sarah's former confidant, rode to the ranch. On a sweltering afternoon, she descended from her carriage with imperious grace. No greeting, no courtesy. Her gaze swept Katerina with disdain before she turned to Max. "You dishonor Sarah's memory. Do you think the town will stand idle? A virtuous widow lost, and now you replace her with this harlot. You would make a mockery of this ranch." Katerina stood frozen. Each word stung like a slap. She was used to contempt, but hearing Sarah's name, Sarah, gentle Sarah, Max's beloved, used as a weapon to compare, the pain tightened in her chest until she could scarcely breathe. That night, back in her cabin, she sat long at the window, staring across the fields. The thought rose like a tide. Perhaps I should leave. Perhaps I'm only destroying his life. Perhaps leaving is the only way to give him peace. Max knew. At her door, he found her gathering her few belongings. His heart clenched. He stood long in the moonlight. His shadow stretched before he spoke, his voice hoarse. "If you leave, they win. They'll say they were right, that you were nothing no man could keep. I won't allow that. Not because I wish to own you, but because I cannot lose you." Katerina looked up, her eyes shimmering. "Max, you don't understand. They despise me. They'll turn their backs on you. The whole town will rise against this ranch. I don't want to stain your life." Max stepped inside, his gaze fierce and tender all at once. His hands gripped her shoulders, his words striking with steady weight. "Listen to me, Katerina. I lived 3 years in darkness. You are the only one who brought light back. If the price of living truly is that the town turns against me, I'll pay it. I don't need their approval. I need you." She trembled. All her life, no one had ever held her back. No one had ever told her she mattered. She had always been something to possess or something to discard, but Max was different. He held her not to cage her, but to let her be herself. Outside, night wind whispered across the fields, a quiet hymn. Inside the cabin, two souls pressed by judgment leaned into each other. Katerina let the bundle fall from her hands, tears spilling silently. Max clasped her hand tight, as though swearing he would fight the world itself if it meant she stayed. And that night, a new faith stirred in Katerina's heart. For the first time, perhaps, she felt she did not need to run. Part 6. A proposal without poetry. The Texas night stretched vast and endless, a black velvet sky scattered with stars like sparks of fire. A gentle wind swept across the plains, carrying the scent of dry grass and damp earth after rain. The silence was so deep, one could hear crickets sing between the beats of their own heart. Max stood there, calloused hands, clenching and loosening, drawing a long breath as though gathering the last of his courage. Before him, Katerina sat upon the cabin steps, her hair tumbling loose, catching the starlight in silver glimmers, her dark eyes deep as waiting waters. He did not kneel, nor bring flowers, nor rings. All he carried was a battered heart once torn and shut now, opening again. His voice broke the night low but firm Katerina. I lost too many years living as a shadow, clinging to Sarah's memory. But I've learned memory is not a chain. It is ground to stand upon. And you've made me believe I can walk forward again. He paused, breath-steady eyes fixed on hers. They want me to live for their judgment, to bend to the town's will. I no longer care. I don't want their approval. I want truth. I want life with you. So I ask you, be my wife. Not to silence gossip, not to replace anyone, but because I choose you. The words were plain, unpolished, stripped of adornment, but their rawness struck deeper than any poetry. Katerina's heart tightened, her eyes blurred. All her life, she had known only scorn commands chains. Never before had a man looked at her and said, "You are chosen." Not for convenience, not for duty, for desire, for love. Tears burned her cheeks warm against the night's chill. She whispered, trembling, "Max, I'm afraid. Afraid I'll never be enough. Afraid I'll ruin you. My whole life, I was wanted only as a burden." Max stepped forward, kneeling before her, his broad hands closing around her trembling ones. His voice softened warm as earth cradling rain. "Katerina, I don't need perfect. I don't seek to replace Sarah. She is gone. What I seek is a companion. Someone who gives me reason to live. That's you, always you." His words poured with the weight of years, lonely nights smoking on the porch, hearing Sarah's voice in the wind, believing himself dead inside. Until that day, he saw Katerina fire in her eyes, defiant against the world. Then he knew his heart had not died. It had only waited to be awakened. Katerina froze, breath caught. In his gaze, she saw no pity, no claim, only respect. He did not want to tame her, nor tie a rope to her neck like the others had. He wanted her as she was wild and unbroken. Her shoulders shook, then she wept not with shame nor defiance, but with release. She wept for the lashes of her past, for the years of scorn, for the fear of never being enough. And she wept because for the first time she was seen, chosen, loved. At last, she nodded small but resolute. "Yes, Max, I will stay. I will be your wife. But on one condition, I will not live in your shadow. I want to build this place with you. I want to prove I can give, not only be saved." Max smiled, rare breaking years of sorrow from his weathered face. He squeezed her hand, his voice steady. "Then it's settled. We'll do everything together." Above them, the Texas sky shone brighter stars, glimmering as if in quiet witness. Katerina leaned against his shoulder, the prairie wind brushing past. For the first time in her life, she no longer felt like the wild outcast hunted by the world. She was a woman, chosen, loved, not with showy words, but with truth. In Max's arms, she whispered, "This is the first time I've ever felt I truly have a home." And Max, his voice like a vow, carved into stone, replied, "From this day on, this will always be our home." Part 7. A wedding on the open plains. On September 28, 1844, dawn broke over Texas with a light unlike any other. The sky was clear, thin white clouds drifting like veils, and a soft breeze carried the scent of wildflowers from distant meadows. On Max's ranch, the ancient oak tree stood tall, its branches arching like a natural canopy, waiting to shelter those who would gather beneath it. In only a few hours, it would witness a wedding one that the community whispered against as much as it waited to see. Katerina rose, early in her small cabin, no longer a place of exile, but the last room she would inhabit as a woman alone. Donna Rosa, the gentle midwife, brought her a simple gown, a white dress once belonging to her daughter, preserved with care. When Katerina slipped it on, she was stunned. In the small mirror, she no longer saw the wild girl, no longer the branded outcast, but a bride, a woman stepping into her day by the choice of her own heart. Max dressed in the big house, wearing a freshly pressed white shirt and a gray vest. Nothing grand, yet his eyes shone brighter than they had in years. As he tied the scarf at his neck, memory of Sarah's wedding day flickered through him. But instead of grief, he felt peace. The memory was no longer a chain, but a foundation, one that gave him strength to embrace new joy. Guests arrived as the sun climbed. Some neighbors kept their distance, their eyes doubtful, but others chose to stand with them. Joan the blacksmith came with his family, carrying a handmade horseshoe polished to shine a token of luck. Ranch hands, who had watched Katerina care for the Mustangs day after day, came with quiet respect in their eyes. Even Padre Miguel, after long struggle with his conscience, agreed to perform the ceremony. He admitted that despite the weight of judgment, there was something sacred in this bond. The old oak was dressed with strips of white cloth woven with wildflowers Katerina had gathered herself, golden daisies, purple lavender, and unnamed blossoms bright with color. It was no grandeur, but it breathed life, the spirit of the marriage it was to frame. When Katerina stepped from her cabin, silence fell. The breeze lifted her skirts, sunlight poured through her dark hair, and she seemed to walk as part of the open fields. To those who watched the woman once called untamable, now walked as a bride sure of her step. Under the oak, Max's heart pounded. When their eyes met, he felt that every wound, every loss had led him here. The ceremony began in quiet. Padre Miguel's voice rose steady, his words plain but heavy with sacredness. He asked Max, "Do you vow to stand with Katerina, not to change her, but to walk with her through life's trials?" Max's reply was strong, unwavering, "I do." Then he asked Katerina, "Do you vow to share your strength and truth, to build a home with Max, honoring both past and future?" Her eyes brimmed as she whispered, "I do." There were no gold rings, only 2 leather cords Max had braided by hand, bound around their wrists. But it was that simplicity that moved the gathering. When Padre Miguel declared them husband and wife, silence held. Then applause broke out. Not from all, but enough to drown the whispers. After the vows, the ranch bloomed with celebration. Long wooden tables were set with cornbread, roasted meat, and strong drink. There was music. There was song. Katerina laughed, radiant dancing, without fear of judgment for the first time. Max watched her spin in her white dress, joy swelling in him, where he thought it buried forever with Sarah. Donna Marta, who had opposed fiercely, did not appear. Yet her absence only made clearer the presence of those who chose to stand with Max and Katerina. The community was divided, but in that moment, love had won a measure of ground. As sunset painted the horizon red, Max and Katerina sat beneath the oak hands entwined. Around them were laughter music, the smell of drink and wildflowers. Katerina leaned into his shoulder, whispering, "I never thought I'd see this day." Max squeezed her hand eyes on the fading sun. "I never thought I'd be given a second chance. But now we have it. And I will not let it go." Beneath the vast Texas sky, in the heart of the wild fields, a humble wedding closed, opening a new life. Katerina, for the first time, was not only the wife of a man, but a woman recognized. However divided the town remained as deserving of happiness. And in that simple joy, they both knew this was more than a wedding. It was the beginning of a life reborn, built on love, respect, and the faith to endure. Part 8. The Light of a New Beginning. The winter of 1844 passed more gently than any Max had known since Sarah's death. The ranch, once silent and desolate, changed with each day, as though Katerina's very breath had brought new life into it. Broken fences were mended, new garden plots were sown, wildflowers bloomed across the porch. Even the mustangs, once untamable, grew calmer, not through force, but because Katerina had given them a new language, the language of trust. Word of Katerina's gift spread quickly. Farmers and travelers brought her horses thought useless, unmanageable, and one by one, under her steady hands and gentle gaze, they transformed creatures once feared grew willing, ready to serve or to walk beside their masters. Max's ranch became known not just for its crops and cattle, but as a horse ranch of renown. Money flowed, but more importantly, so did respect. Whispers shifted from calling her wild to naming her with reverence the woman who whispered to horses. Amid the work, Katerina began to feel a strange change within her. At first, only fatigue, a touch of nausea at dawn. Then came a heaviness in her chest, a sharpness of sense. One afternoon, as the prairie winds swept across the fields, she sat quietly on the porch, her hand drifting to her stomach. A deep instinct whispered. A life was growing within her. Donna Rosa, her gentle friend, confirmed it with a warm smile. "Child, you are to be a mother." The words stunned her. Katerina's heart raced and trembled all at once. She, who had been branded unworthy, who had known only chains and rejection, now carried the chance to give life. When she told Max, he could barely believe. His eyes, hardened by years of grief, now shone with a boy's light. He gathered her close voice, breaking. "Katerina, you've given me what I thought was lost forever." From then on, Max's labors took a new shape. When not in the fields or among the horses, he worked in a small room beside their chamber. Each stroke of hammer and nail, each plank of wood, was for a nursery. With his own hands, he built it a wooden cradle, a rocking chair for Katerina's nights, a wide window for morning sun. Along the cradle's edge, he carved small horses, a promise that their child would grow with the rhythm of the plains. Each day, Katerina passed the room, her heart swelled. She watched Max bent to his work sweat, soaking his shirt eyes, focused as though on the most sacred task of his life. And it was for this nursery was more than a room. It was a symbol of faith, of hope, of a new beginning. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch. Katerina leaned against his shoulder, his hand resting over the gentle curve of her belly. Crickets, insects, and the distant call of horses wove a lullaby into the night. She whispered, "I never thought I would have a family, but now I feel as if my whole life was leading me here." Max's grip tightened, his eyes fixed on the star-strewn sky. "Nor did I. Sarah gave me years of peace, but you have given me new life. We will raise our child in freedom and love, not in chains of judgment." A light stirred in Katerina's heart. For the first time, she was no longer in exile, no longer the wild mare the world had sought to bind. She was wife. She was mother. She was part of a home built on love and trust. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a home, a land where two wounded souls had found light, where a family was forming, promising to carry their story forward, not only in love, but in the new life growing between them. Part 9. Dawn and the First Cry. The Texas night lay heavy over the ranch, a velvet curtain drawn tight. It was late October, and the prairie winds carried a sharp chill, slipping through cracks in doors and panes of glass. In the big house, candlelight flickered against wooden walls, throwing long shadows across Katerina's pale face. Her brow shone with sweat. Her black hair clung damp, her lips were parched, yet her eyes blazed with determination. Max paced the hallway, his heart in knots. Never had he felt so helpless. He had faced storm's loss, wild mustangs, and failed harvests. But nothing shook him like this. Behind that door, the woman he loved fought a battle with pain to bring new life into the world. A cry of anguish broke the silence, Katerina's voice sharp as a blade through the night. Max froze, clutching the doorframe, aching to burst in. But Donna Rosa's words restrained him. "This is a woman's battle. Trust her. She is stronger than you believe." But how could he stand idle when every sound from her lips carved at his chest? He dropped to his knees, clasped his hands, whispering prayers he had long abandoned. "Lord, keep her safe. Let me see our child born." Inside, Katerina's breath came ragged. Donna Rosa's voice was steady, commanding, yet gentle. "Breathe deep. Now out. You've faced storms, you've calmed the wild. You can do this." Katerina nodded weakly, biting her lip. Pain tore through her body, yet within her burned a single fire. This child must be born. This child is our proof of love. Time stretched endless. Max heard the hiss of boiling water, the clatter of basins, Rosa's hurried steps, and above it all, Katerina's groans, guttural, unyielding. His own breath caught his body taut like a rope about to snap. Then, at the first slit of dawn, tearing through the night, came a sound. Clear, strong, piercing all fear, the cry of a newborn child. Max collapsed into a chair chest, heaving eyes wide. That cry was not only the voice of new life, it was a hymn, the birth of a new chapter. The door opened. Donna Rosa appeared, sweat on her brow, a smile radiant on her face. In her arms, a small bundle swaddled tight, a tiny girl. Her eyes closed, fists clenched. A daughter, healthy, and the mother is safe. Max staggered to his feet, his legs trembling. He held out his great hands, fumbling, as Rosa placed the child into them. The moment that fragile weight rested in his arms, his entire being shuddered. The baby wailed her cry, ringing out like a proclamation, "I am here." Tears rare, long withheld, ran down Max's weathered face. His hand trembled as it brushed her cheek. He whispered, "Helena, my light." He entered the room where Katerina lay, spent hair plastered her smile, fragile yet radiant. Her weary eyes lit at the sight of Max and the child. He sank beside her, placing Helena in her arms. At her mother's touch, the infant's cries stilled to soft breaths. Katerina clutched the child, tears streaming. Her voice shook. I can't believe it. She's really ours. Max laid his rough hand over hers, nodding eyes wet. Yes, she is ours, and she is the beginning of everything. Sunlight poured through the window, washing the three of them in gold. A man whose heart had once been broken beyond repair, a woman once cast aside by the world, and a tiny life living proof that love can return, can heal, can light even the darkest corners. In that moment, Max knew he had found all he had ever sought. Katerina knew she would never have to run again. And Helena, with her first cry, had opened the dawn of a new era where this family would walk forward together, held by faith, hope, and unyielding love. Part 10. The Legacy of Freedom. Spring of 1847 brought a new rhythm of life to Max and Katerina's ranch. Green fields stretched to the horizon, where mustangs thundered freely, their cries carrying like the endless song of wind and prairie. Helena, now 3 years old, ran laughing through the grass, her black hair wild in the sun, her little feet trampling blossoms, her laughter echoing like bells. Beside her trotted a young colt once rescued by Katerina in the storm, now her gentle companion. Not far away, Katerina watched Cloak drawn tight against the breeze. Her smile held not only a mother's joy, but a woman's pride. A woman once cast out, now the heart of a family, a ranch. And beyond that, a community learning to change. In the stables, young women gathered around her. They were those once branded difficult, unfit, unmarriageable. But here beneath Katerina's hand, they learned a new language, the language of freedom. She did not shape them into docile ladies as the town demanded. She taught them to touch a horse's mane, to feel its breath, to listen with heart instead of whip. When a restless horse reared, snorting in defiance, one girl stumbled back in fear. Katerina stepped forward, laid her hand upon its neck, whispered the sounds only she knew. Slowly, the beast lowered its head, eyes softening. She turned to her students, her voice steady. Do you see? Freedom is not chaos. It is understanding. When we respect their freedom, they will trust us. Love is the same. The girls nodded, their eyes alight. And Katerina knew then she had given them what she once longed for: recognition and the belief they were worthy to live true to themselves. From afar, Max watched. Once a man consumed by grief after Sarah's death, he now smiled with quiet pride. He saw Katerina not only as his wife, but as a teacher, a guide the soul who had turned his ranch into a haven for broken spirits. And when his gaze fell upon Helena, laughing in the fields, he saw a future brighter than he had ever believed possible. That evening, as the sun sank red behind the hills, Max and Katerina sat beneath the ancient oak, the place of their vows. Helena played nearby, her laughter mingling with wind hoofbeats and the distant hum of the prairie. Max clasped Katerina's hand, his weathered palm entwined with her scarred but softened fingers. His voice was low, warm. Look, Katerina. Everything we endured, storm's judgment, nights of despair, has led us here. I thought my life was only shadows, but you brought the light. And together, we've built a legacy. Katerina turned her eyes gleaming in the dusk. A legacy not of taming, but of freedom. Here Helena will grow, knowing she can run, laugh, dream, and love without fear of chains. And those girls, they will carry that seed forward. Max nodded. The oak leaves rustled in the wind as if in agreement. He tightened his hold on her hand, and together they watched Helena run through the fields, arms wide free as a fledgling bird. There was no more fear, no more doubt, only wholeness, a love that did not bind but released. A small family, yet carrying the strength of a truth. True love grants freedom, and freedom is the greatest legacy of all. The Texas sunset poured like fire across the sky shadows, stretching long over the prairie. The ranch no longer stood as it once had. New fences lined the pastures. Horses grazed at ease, raising their heads to cry into the wind a song of freedom echoing across the west. By the fence line, Max Katerina and little Helena stood hand in hand. His rough palm clasped the hand once called Wild, while Helena's tiny fingers were nestled between. Together, they gazed at the Mustangs running against the horizon, their reflection in flesh and spirit, once broken, once confined, now free, alive. The breeze carried scents of hay wildflowers and peace. Max leaned, pressing a kiss into Katerina's hair. Helena laughed, pointing to the herd, her eyes alight with dreams as vast as the sky. In that moment, they knew they had everything. They needed no approval from the world. Happiness was here in their hands. Theirs was no polished ballad of romance, but proof of a deeper truth. Love in the West is not meant to tame, but to set free. If this story moved, you leave a comment and rate it from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch more heartfelt tales of Wild West love.